Marcus Chun was the kind of man people called lucky. At 34 years old, he had everything figured out. A stable job as a regional sales manager for a medical supply company, a beautiful home in the quiet suburbs of Portland, Oregon, and 3 healthy children who adored him. His wife, Rebecca Walsh, worked as a pediatric nurse at Providence Hospital. They met in college, married young, and built their lives brick by brick with the kind of quiet determination that never makes headlines but creates solid foundations. Their house on Maple Ridge Court was modest but comfortable. 3 bedrooms, a small backyard where Marcus taught his kids to throw a baseball, and a front porch where neighbors would wave as they walked their dogs. The Chun-Walsh family was the picture of suburban normalcy. Soccer games on Saturdays, family dinners every night, homework sessions at the kitchen table. Marcus coached his oldest son's Little League team. Rebecca volunteered at the elementary school library. They were good people living a good life. Marcus had grown up in San Francisco, the son of immigrants who ran a small restaurant in Chinatown. His parents taught him the value of hard work, respect for elders, and the importance of family above all else. When he married Rebecca in 2012, he inherited not just a wife, but her entire family. Her father had passed away 3 years before they met, so it was just Rebecca, her younger brother, and their mother, Patricia Walsh. Patricia Walsh was 71 years old, a retired administrative assistant who lived alone in a small house 15 minutes away. She had raised her children by herself after her husband died of cancer in 2007. For years, she was the matriarch who held everything together. She organized holiday dinners, remembered every birthday, and made sure her grandchildren knew their family history. Rebecca adored her mother. She called her every day, visited twice a week, and included her in every family milestone. At first, Marcus and Patricia got along fine. She welcomed him into the family, attended the wedding, and seemed genuinely happy that her daughter had found someone stable and kind. But over the years, something shifted. Small comments turned into criticisms. Suggestions became demands. Patricia had opinions about everything: how Marcus disciplined the children, how much time he spent at work, how he handled finances, even how he mowed the lawn. Rebecca would laugh it off, saying her mother was just set in her ways, that she meant well, that she was lonely after losing her husband. Marcus tried to be understanding. He knew Patricia had sacrificed everything to raise her children alone. He knew she was protective of Rebecca. He tried to be respectful, to listen, to accommodate her wishes. But Patricia's involvement in their lives grew more intrusive. She would show up unannounced, letting herself in with the spare key Rebecca had given her. She would rearrange things in their kitchen, criticize Rebecca's cooking in front of the children, and suggest that Marcus was not providing adequately for the family, despite his steady income and their comfortable lifestyle. The real tension began in 2019 when Marcus received a promotion. The new position required occasional travel, maybe 3 or 4 trips a year, to medical conferences and client meetings. Patricia was furious. She told Rebecca that Marcus was abandoning his family, that he was putting his career before his children, that this was the beginning of the end. Rebecca tried to defend her husband, explaining that the promotion meant better financial security, that the travel was minimal, that Marcus was still an involved and present father. Patricia would not hear it. She began calling Rebecca daily, sometimes multiple times a day, expressing her concerns, planting seeds of doubt, questioning Marcus's commitment. Marcus noticed the change in Rebecca. She became anxious, torn between her mother and her husband. She would relay Patricia's concerns to Marcus, not because she agreed with them, but because she felt obligated to at least mention them. Marcus would reassure her, remind her that they were partners, that they made decisions together, that her mother's fears were unfounded. But the constant interference was exhausting. In early 2023, things escalated. Marcus's youngest child, 7-year-old Emma, mentioned at dinner that Grandma Patricia had told her that Daddy was always gone and that Mommy had to do everything alone. Marcus was shocked. He confronted Rebecca gently, asking if her mother was saying these things to the children. Rebecca admitted that her mother had been making comments, but she insisted it was harmless, just Patricia being dramatic. Marcus disagreed. He said it was inappropriate for Patricia to undermine him in front of his children, that it was confusing for them and damaging to the family dynamic. Rebecca agreed to talk to her mother. That conversation did not go well. Patricia accused Rebecca of being brainwashed by Marcus, said she was just trying to protect her grandchildren, and suggested that Marcus was controlling and manipulating Rebecca into cutting her out. Rebecca was devastated. She loved her mother but also loved her husband. She felt trapped between the two most important people in her life. By summer of 2023, Marcus made a decision. He sat down with Rebecca and proposed setting boundaries. Patricia could still visit, but she needed to call ahead. She could still see the grandchildren, but she could not make negative comments about Marcus in their presence. Rebecca hesitated, but ultimately agreed. She knew something had to change. When Rebecca told her mother about the new boundaries, Patricia exploded. She accused Marcus of poisoning Rebecca against her, said he was trying to isolate her from her own family, and threatened to take the grandchildren away through legal means if necessary. Rebecca was stunned. Her mother had never spoken like this before. Marcus told Rebecca they needed to stand firm, that giving in to Patricia's demands would only make things worse. For 2 months, Patricia barely spoke to them. She missed the children's school events, ignored phone calls, and refused invitations to family dinners. Rebecca was heartbroken. She missed her mother desperately and felt guilty for enforcing boundaries. Marcus reassured her that they had done the right thing, that healthy relationships require mutual respect, and that Patricia would eventually come around. But Patricia did not come around. Instead, she began planning something else. Something that would destroy the family she claimed to be protecting. And on a cold October afternoon, when Marcus came home early from work to watch his kids while Rebecca worked a double shift at the hospital, Patricia made her move. Marcus opened the door for his mother-in-law, thinking maybe she was finally ready to reconcile. He had no idea he was letting his killer into his home. And the only witness to what happened next would be a golden retriever named Bailey, lying quietly in the corner, watching everything. October 12th, 2023 started like any other Thursday. Marcus woke up at 6:30, showered, and went downstairs to make coffee. Rebecca had already left for her early shift at the hospital. She worked 3 12-hour shifts a week, and Thursdays were always brutal because she had to be there by 6 in the morning. Marcus handled the morning routine on those days. He woke the kids, made breakfast, packed lunches, and drove them to school before heading to his own office. By 8:15, all 3 children were dropped off. His oldest, 12-year-old Nathan, at the middle school. His daughter Sophie, age 10, at the elementary school. And little Emma at the same building, just a different wing for the younger grades. Marcus watched them walk through the school doors, waved when Emma turned back to blow him a kiss, then drove to work. His office was 20 minutes away in downtown Portland. Marcus spent the morning in back-to-back meetings, reviewing quarterly sales reports and planning for an upcoming product launch. Around noon, his boss called him into her office. She told him the client meeting scheduled for tomorrow had been moved to next week. That meant Marcus could leave early today and take a long weekend. He thanked her, finished up some paperwork, and left the office at 2 in the afternoon. He texted Rebecca, got off early. "I'll pick up the kids and handle dinner. You just focus on work," she replied with a heart emoji and a thank you. Marcus stopped at the grocery store, picked up ingredients for spaghetti and meatballs, the kids' favorite, and headed home. He arrived at the house on Maple Ridge Court at 2:45. The neighborhood was quiet. Most people were still at work. A few retirees were outside doing yard work. Marcus waved at Mr. Hoffman next door, who was raking leaves. He parked in the driveway, grabbed the groceries, and walked to the front door. Bailey, their 5-year-old golden retriever, was already at the window, tail wagging, excited to see him home early. Marcus unlocked the door, and Bailey greeted him with his usual enthusiasm, jumping up, licking his hand, circling around his legs. Marcus laughed, set the groceries on the kitchen counter, and poured fresh water into Bailey's bowl. The dog drank eagerly, then followed Marcus around the house as he changed out of his work clothes into jeans and a sweatshirt. At 3:10, the doorbell rang. Bailey barked once, then ran to the door. Marcus assumed it was a delivery. He had ordered some books online for Nathan's birthday next month. He opened the door and froze. Patricia Walsh stood on his porch, hands clasped in front of her, a thin smile on her face. Marcus had not seen his mother-in-law in 2 months, not since the argument about boundaries. He hesitated, unsure what to say. Patricia spoke first. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "Marcus, can we talk? I think we need to clear the air. I miss my grandchildren. I miss Rebecca. I don't want this distance anymore." Marcus studied her face, looking for signs of sincerity. She looked tired, older than he remembered. He thought about Rebecca, how much she had been hurting over the estrangement. Maybe this was Patricia finally coming around. Maybe she was ready to respect their boundaries and rebuild the relationship. He stepped aside and let her in. Patricia walked into the living room, sat down on the couch, and folded her hands in her lap. Bailey sniffed her cautiously, then retreated to his bed in the corner. The dog did not wag his tail. He just watched her, silent and still. Marcus offered her water. She declined. He sat down in the armchair across from her and waited. Patricia began talking. She apologized for her behavior, said she had been too controlling, admitted she had trouble letting go. She said she realized Marcus was a good father and a good husband, that Rebecca was happy, and that she had no right to interfere. Marcus felt relief wash over him. This was what they had been hoping for. He told her he appreciated her honesty, that they wanted her in their lives, that the kids missed her too. Then Patricia's tone shifted. She leaned forward, her eyes hardening. But you need to understand something, Marcus. Rebecca is my daughter. Those children are my grandchildren. I raised Rebecca alone. I sacrificed everything for her. And you come along and think you can just cut me out? You think you can tell me when I can see my own family? Marcus felt his stomach tighten. This was not an apology. This was an accusation. He kept his voice calm. Patricia, we're not cutting you out. We just need boundaries. You can't undermine me in front of the kids. You can't show up unannounced and criticize everything we do. That's not healthy for anyone. Patricia stood up abruptly. Healthy? You want to talk about healthy? You travel for work and leave Rebecca alone with 3 kids. You put your career first. You're selfish, Marcus. You always have been. Marcus stood up too, trying to de-escalate. Patricia, I think you should leave. We can talk about this when Rebecca is here. Maybe the 3 of us can sit down together and work this out. But Patricia did not move toward the door. Instead, she reached into her purse. Marcus assumed she was getting her keys, but when her hand came out, she was holding something else. A small kitchen knife, the kind used for paring fruit. It had a 4-inch blade, sharp and silver. Marcus's heart stopped. Patricia, what are you doing? Put that down. His voice was steady, but his mind was racing. Was she trying to scare him? Was this some kind of breakdown? He took a step back, hands raised. Patricia, please, let's just calm down. We can talk about this. But Patricia was not listening. Her face was twisted with rage, years of resentment finally spilling over. You ruined everything, she hissed. My daughter was fine before you. Now she doesn't need me anymore. You took her from me. She lunged. Marcus tried to grab her wrist, but she was faster than he expected. The blade caught him in the side, just below his ribs. Pain exploded through his body. He stumbled backward, crashing into the coffee table. Patricia pulled the knife back and struck again, this time catching his shoulder. Marcus fell to the floor, gasping, trying to crawl toward the front door. Bailey was barking now, loud and frantic, but the dog did not attack. He was trained to be gentle, never aggressive. Patricia stood over Marcus, breathing hard, the knife still in her hand. He looked up at her, blood soaking through his shirt, and whispered, "Why?" She did not answer. She just turned and walked calmly to the kitchen sink, washed the knife, dried it, and placed it back in her purse. Then she left through the front door, closing it quietly behind her, as if nothing had happened. Marcus lay on the living room floor, alone except for Bailey, who pressed his body against his owner's side, whimpering softly. And that is where Rebecca would find him 3 hours later when she came home from her shift. Rebecca Chun pulled into the driveway at 6:20 in the evening. Her shift had been exhausting. 2 emergency admissions, 1 difficult family conversation, and endless paperwork. All she wanted was to hug her kids, eat dinner with her family, and collapse into bed. She noticed her mother's car was not on the street. Good. At least there would be no surprise visit tonight. She walked to the front door and immediately knew something was wrong. Bailey was barking frantically from inside, a sound she had never heard from him before. High-pitched, desperate, continuous. She fumbled with her keys, pushed the door open, and froze. The living room was a nightmare. Blood splattered across the hardwood floor, the coffee table overturned, and Marcus is lying face down near the couch, completely still. Bailey stood beside him, shaking violently, his golden fur matted with blood. Rebecca screamed. She dropped her purse and ran to her husband, falling to her knees beside him. Marcus, Marcus, can you hear me?" She pressed her fingers to his neck, searching for a pulse. Nothing. His skin was cold. She rolled him over gently, and that is when she saw the wounds. 2 deep stab marks, 1 in his side, 1 in his shoulder. His shirt was soaked through with dark red blood. She knew immediately he had been dead for hours. Her training kicked in. She grabbed her phone, dialed 911, and forced herself to stay calm. 911, what is your emergency? My husband. He's been stabbed. He's not breathing. I need an ambulance. The dispatcher asked for the address. Rebecca gave it, her voice shaking. The dispatcher asked if she could perform CPR. Rebecca looked at Marcus's body, at the amount of blood, at the coldness of his skin. She knew it was too late, but she tried anyway. She tilted his head back, checked his airway, and began compressions. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. She repeated the cycle over and over, tears streaming down her face, knowing it was pointless but unable to stop. Paramedics arrived in 6 minutes. Police came right behind them. Officers entered the house, secured the scene, and gently pulled Rebecca away from Marcus's body. A young officer, barely older than 25, guided her to the front porch and asked her to wait outside. She stood there in shock, watching as more police cars arrived, as crime scene tape went up, as neighbors gathered on the sidewalk whispering and staring. Detective Sarah Coleman arrived at 6:50. She was 42 years old, a veteran of the Portland Police Bureau with 16 years in homicide. She had seen countless crime scenes, but walking into the Chun house that evening, she immediately sensed this was not a random break-in or a robbery gone wrong. The house was undisturbed, nothing stolen, no forced entry. This was personal. She approached Rebecca on the porch. "Mrs. Chun, I'm Detective Coleman. I am so sorry for your loss. I know this is an incredibly difficult time, but I need to ask you some questions. Can you tell me what happened?" Rebecca wiped her eyes and tried to speak coherently. "I came home from work. I found him like that. I don't know what happened. I don't know who would do this." Detective Coleman asked gently, "Was your husband having problems with anyone? Any threats? Any conflicts at work or with neighbors?" Rebecca shook her head. "No. Everyone loved Marcus. He was kind. He never fought with anyone." Coleman made a mental note. "Victims who are universally liked often have hidden conflicts." She asked about the children. Rebecca's face crumpled. "Oh God, the kids. They're still at school, after-school program. I need to pick them up. I can't let them see this." Coleman assured her that a family liaison officer would help arrange for the children to stay with relatives tonight. She asked if there was anyone Rebecca could call. Rebecca thought for a moment, then said quietly, "My mother. I should call my mother." Inside the house, forensic technicians were processing the scene. They photographed the body from every angle, collected blood samples, dusted for fingerprints, and bagged evidence. The medical examiner arrived and conducted a preliminary examination. 2 stab wounds. One punctured the liver, the other nicked the subclavian artery. Cause of death would likely be exsanguination, bleeding out. Time of death estimated between 3 and 4 in the afternoon based on body temperature and rigor mortis. Detective Coleman walked through the house methodically. No signs of struggle in other rooms. Kitchen was clean. Groceries still on the counter, unpacked. Marcus had been home for less than an hour before he was killed. She returned to the living room and noticed the dog. Bailey was still there, refusing to leave Marcus's side. Animal control had been called to remove him, but every time someone approached, the dog growled softly, protective even in death. Coleman crouched down and studied Bailey. The dog's fur was stained with blood, but there were no injuries on him. He had not been hurt. He had simply lain beside his owner as he died. She noticed something else. Bailey kept looking toward the front door, then back at Marcus, then at the door again, like he was remembering something, like he was trying to tell them something. A junior officer approached Coleman. "Detective, we found something." He held up an evidence bag. Inside was a single strand of gray hair, found on the couch where someone had been sitting. It did not match Marcus's dark hair or Rebecca's brown hair. Coleman took the bag and examined it closely. "Run DNA on this. Check it against the national database, and get me a list of everyone who had access to this house." Rebecca sat on the porch, phone in hand, staring at her mother's contact information. She pressed call. The phone rang 3 times before Patricia answered. "Hello, Mom?" Rebecca's voice broke. "Something terrible happened. Marcus is dead." There was a long pause on the other end. Then Patricia spoke, her voice oddly flat. "What happened?" Rebecca sobbed. "Someone killed him. Someone came into our house and killed him." Another pause. Patricia's response was careful, measured. "I'll be right there." 20 minutes later, Patricia Walsh arrived. She parked down the street, walked slowly toward the house, and approached the police tape. An officer stopped her. "Ma'am, this is a crime scene. You can't come in." Patricia explained she was the victim's mother-in-law. The officer radioed Detective Coleman, who came out to meet her. "Mrs. Walsh, I'm Detective Coleman. I'm very sorry for your family's loss." Patricia nodded solemnly. "Thank you. Can I see my daughter?" Coleman led Patricia to the porch where Rebecca sat. Mother and daughter embraced. Rebecca cried into Patricia's shoulder. "Mom, who would do this? Who would kill Marcus?" Patricia stroked her daughter's hair and whispered, "I don't know, sweetheart, I don't know." But Detective Coleman was watching Patricia closely, and she noticed something strange. Bailey, who had been calm all evening despite the chaos, suddenly stood up inside the house. His ears went back, his body went rigid, and he started barking again, that same frantic, desperate bark from earlier. He was staring directly at Patricia Walsh through the window. Detective Coleman had interviewed hundreds of witnesses and observed countless family members at crime scenes. She knew how people grieved. Some collapsed in hysterics, others went numb with shock. But Patricia Walsh's reaction was different, too controlled, too measured, and the dog's behavior was impossible to ignore. Bailey continued barking, his entire body trembling, eyes locked on Patricia through the living room window. An animal control officer tried to calm him, but the dog pulled away, hackles raised, growling low in his throat. Coleman had seen Police K-9 South react to suspects before, but Bailey was not a trained detection dog. He was a family pet. Yet his response to Patricia was unmistakable: fear and aggression. Coleman approached Rebecca gently. "Mrs. Chun, I need to ask you something. Has Bailey ever acted this way around your mother before?" Rebecca looked confused. "What do you mean?" Coleman gestured toward the window. "He's been barking at her since she arrived, very aggressively. Has he ever done that?" Rebecca wiped her eyes and looked at her mother, then at the window where Bailey was still growling. "No, never. Bailey loves everyone. He's never aggressive." Patricia interjected quickly. "He's traumatized. He found Marcus. Of course he's acting strange." Coleman nodded slowly but did not respond. She excused herself and walked back into the house. She found the lead forensic technician examining the couch. "Find anything?" The technician held up several evidence bags. "Gray hair, like we showed you earlier. Also found fabric fibers on the cushion. Looks like someone sat here recently. And there's a partial shoe print near the front door. Small size, women's shoe." Coleman's mind was working. She asked the technician to photograph Bailey's position relative to the body. When officers first arrived, where was the dog? The technician checked his notes. Lying next to the victim, pressed against his side, wouldn't leave him. Coleman filed that information away. Dogs don't lie. If Bailey had witnessed the attack, his memory of the perpetrator would be instinctive. She stepped outside and made a phone call. She needed an expert opinion. Within 30 minutes, Dr. Raymond Foster, a veterinary behaviorist who consulted with law enforcement, arrived at the scene. Coleman explained the situation. Dr. Foster entered the house cautiously, observed Bailey from a distance, then asked officers to bring Patricia closer to the window. As soon as Patricia came within 10 feet of the glass, Bailey erupted again, barking, snarling, trying to lunge toward her. Dr. Foster stepped back outside and spoke quietly to Coleman. "Detective, that dog is displaying a very specific trauma response. He's not generally anxious. He's targeting one individual. In my professional opinion, that animal witnessed something involving that woman, and his brain has created a permanent association between her scent and a threatening event." Coleman asked the critical question. "Could he be reacting because she's just part of the stressful day?" Dr. Foster shook his head. "No, I've seen hundreds of trauma cases. This is targeted. That dog perceives her as a threat." Coleman thanked him and returned to the porch. She needed to tread carefully. Patricia Walsh was the victim's mother-in-law, a 71-year-old woman with no criminal history. But Coleman's instincts were screaming. She asked Patricia a simple question. "Mrs. Walsh, where were you this afternoon between 2 and 5? Patricia answered without hesitation. "At home. I was cleaning my house." "Can anyone verify that?" Patricia paused. "No, I live alone." Coleman made another note. She asked if Patricia had visited Marcus and Rebecca's house recently. Patricia's face tightened slightly. "Not in 2 months. We had a disagreement." "I've been giving them space." Coleman asked what the disagreement was about. Rebecca answered for her mother. "We set some boundaries. Mom felt like we were pushing her away. It wasn't like that. We just needed some balance." Coleman asked Patricia directly, "How did you feel about those boundaries?" Patricia's voice grew cold. "I felt like my daughter's husband was trying to cut me out of my grandchildren's lives. But I accepted it. I stayed away." Coleman watched her carefully. "So you harbor some resentment toward Marcus?" Patricia bristled. "I didn't say that." Coleman pressed gently. "But you felt he was the one creating distance." Patricia hesitated, then said quietly, "Yes. Inside the house, forensic teams were finishing up. They collected the knife from the kitchen drawer, standard procedure to rule out weapons from the home. But one knife was missing, a small paring knife that Rebecca later confirmed had been in the block that morning. Coleman ordered a search of the surrounding area. Officers combed through trash cans, bushes, and storm drains within a 2-block radius. At 8 in the evening, an officer found something. 3 blocks away, in a public trash bin outside a coffee shop, a small knife wrapped in paper towels. The blade was clean, recently washed, but forensic testing would reveal microscopic traces. Blood evidence is nearly impossible to completely eliminate. The knife was bagged and sent to the lab for expedited analysis. Coleman returned to Patricia. "Mrs. Walsh, I need you to come to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement. Just routine. We're interviewing everyone close to the family." Patricia agreed. "Of course, whatever I can do to help." But as she turned to leave, Bailey went wild again. He threw himself against the window so hard that an officer had to pull him back to prevent injury. Patricia flinched, and for just a moment, Coleman saw something in her eyes. Not confusion, recognition. Rebecca stayed with her brother that night. The children were told their father had been in an accident. They would learn the truth soon enough, but not tonight. Patricia drove home alone, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. She had been so careful. She had washed the knife. She had left no fingerprints. But she had not counted on the dog. Animals were unpredictable. And Bailey had seen everything. Detective Coleman sat in her office late that night, reviewing the evidence. Gray hair, small shoe print, missing knife, and a dog that knew exactly who the killer was. She picked up her phone and called the lab. "I need a rush on that DNA from the hair sample. Compare it against Patricia Walsh. I'll get you a reference sample tomorrow." Because sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who smile while they destroy you. And Patricia Walsh had been smiling all evening. Patricia Walsh arrived at the Portland Police Bureau at 9 the next morning. She wore a conservative navy dress and carried a small purse. Detective Coleman met her in the lobby and led her to an interview room. Small, windowless, with a table, 3 chairs, and a camera mounted in the corner. Patricia sat down calmly, hands folded in her lap. Coleman sat across from her, a folder in front of her containing preliminary forensic reports. "Thank you for coming in, Mrs. Walsh. This is just a formal statement. I need to walk through your day yesterday." Patricia nodded. "Of course." Coleman started with basic questions. "What time did you wake up? What did you eat for breakfast? What did you do in the morning?" Patricia answered everything smoothly. She woke at 7, had toast and coffee, spent the morning doing laundry and cleaning. "Watched television in the afternoon." Coleman asked casually, "What were you watching?" Patricia hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "A cooking show. I don't remember the name." Coleman made a note. She pulled out a photograph from the folder. "This is a shoe print we found near the front door of Marcus and Rebecca's home. Size 7, women's shoe." "What size do you wear, Mrs. Walsh?" Patricia stiffened slightly. 7, but lots of people wear size 7. Coleman nodded. "True." She pulled out another photograph. "This is a strand of hair we found on the couch. Gray hair. We're running DNA analysis. Would you be willing to provide a reference sample?" Patricia's calm facade cracked for a moment. "Why would my hair be there? I told you I haven't been to that house in 2 months. Coleman leaned forward. "That's what I'm trying to understand. Because if your DNA matches this hair, it means you were there recently. And if you were there, I need to know why you lied about it." Patricia's face went pale. "I want a lawyer." Coleman sat back. "That's your right. But let me tell you what I think happened. I think you went to that house yesterday. I think you and Marcus had an argument. And I think things got out of hand." Patricia stood up abruptly. "I'm not saying another word without a lawyer. This conversation is over." Coleman remained seated. "Fine. But you should know, we found the knife. The one used to kill Marcus. And we're testing it for DNA right now." Patricia froze. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Coleman continued. "If your DNA is on that knife, Mrs. Walsh, there's no explanation that will save you." Patricia grabbed her purse and walked toward the door. Coleman called after her, "Don't leave town. We'll be in touch." The door closed, and Coleman immediately called the lab. "How fast can you get me those DNA results?" The lab technician replied, 48 hours. While Patricia drove home, her mind racing, Detective Coleman obtained a search warrant for Patricia's house. By noon, a team of officers was going through every room. They found the shoes Patricia had worn the day before. Slight traces of blood on the sole, invisible to the naked eye but detectable under luminol. They found a trash bag in the garage containing paper towels with faint reddish stains. And in Patricia's bedroom closet, they found a small cardboard box containing newspaper clippings, articles about Marcus and Rebecca's wedding, photos of the grandchildren, and handwritten notes. Bitter, angry notes. One note read, "He took her from me." Another said, "She doesn't need me anymore because of him." And a third, dated just 1 week earlier, "If he were gone, everything would go back to normal." Coleman read the notes and felt a chill. This was premeditation. This was not a crime of passion. This was a calculated decision to eliminate the person Patricia blamed for her loss of control. The DNA results came back faster than expected. The hair from the couch matched Patricia Walsh. The blood traces on the knife matched Marcus Chun. And microscopic skin cells found on the knife handle matched Patricia Walsh. The evidence was overwhelming. Coleman prepared an arrest warrant. On October 14th, 2 days after the murder, officers arrived at Patricia's home at 6 in the morning. She answered the door in her bathrobe, eyes red from lack of sleep. "Patricia Walsh, you are under arrest for the murder of Marcus Chun." Patricia did not resist. She simply closed her eyes as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. She was read her rights, placed in the back of a police car, and driven to the county jail. Rebecca received the call an hour later. She was at her brother's house trying to explain to her children why Daddy was not coming home. When Detective Coleman told her that her mother had been arrested for Marcus's murder, Rebecca collapsed. It was impossible. Her mother loved her. Her mother would never. But the evidence did not lie. And deep down, Rebecca remembered all the comments, all the resentment, all the boundary violations. She remembered her mother's voice on the phone the night of the murder. That strange flatness, that lack of surprise. Bailey, meanwhile, was staying temporarily with a friend of the family. But every time someone mentioned Patricia's name, the dog's ears would go back, and he would retreat to a corner. The trauma was permanent. Dr. Foster explained to Rebecca that Bailey would likely never trust elderly women again. His brain had been rewired by witnessing violence. He would carry that memory for the rest of his life. Patricia's lawyer tried to negotiate. She claimed it was self-defense, that Marcus had attacked her first. But there were no defensive wounds on her body, no bruises, no scratches. Marcus, on the other hand, had defensive wounds on his hands where he tried to block the knife. The forensic evidence painted a clear picture. Patricia had attacked without warning. Marcus had tried to defend himself and failed. The prosecutor charged Patricia with first-degree murder, premeditated, calculated. The trial was set for March 2024. And as Patricia sat in her cell, she realized the one thing she had fought so hard to prevent had happened anyway. She had lost her daughter. But this time, it was not because of Marcus. It was because of her own choices. Her own inability to let go. And now she would spend the rest of her life in prison, alone. The trial began on March 18th, 2024, 5 months after Marcus Chun's murder. The courtroom in Multnomah County was packed. Reporters filled the back rows. Marcus's co-workers came to pay their respects. Rebecca sat in the front with her brother, her face hollow and exhausted. She had not spoken to her mother since the arrest. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. DNA from the hair on the couch, blood traces on the knife matching Marcus, shoe prints matching Patricia's size and tread pattern, the handwritten notes found in her closet revealing months of resentment and planning. Cell phone records showing Patricia had driven past Marcus and Rebecca's house 3 times in the week before the murder. Despite claiming she had stayed away, the most damning evidence came from the medical examiner. Dr. Lisa Tran testified that Marcus had been stabbed twice. The first wound to his side was deep but not immediately fatal. The second wound to his shoulder had severed the subclavian artery. Marcus had bled out within minutes. Dr. Tran explained that the angle and force of the wounds indicated an attacker striking downward at a victim who was already on the ground. This was not self-defense. This was execution. Patricia's defense attorney argued that she had suffered a psychological break, that years of feeling abandoned by her daughter had caused temporary insanity. But the prosecution countered with the notes, the planning, the cleanup. Insanity does not wash a murder weapon and dispose of it 3 blocks away. Insanity does not calmly leave a crime scene and go home as if nothing happened. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. On March 22nd, they returned with a verdict: guilty of murder in the first degree. Patricia showed no reaction. She simply stared straight ahead as the judge thanked the jury and scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. April 5th, 2024, sentencing day. The courtroom was quieter this time. Fewer spectators, just family and those who needed closure. The judge allowed victim impact statements. Rebecca walked slowly to the podium. She had written nothing down. She spoke from her broken heart. My mother killed my husband, the father of my children. She looked him in the eye and took his life because she could not control mine. My kids ask me every day when Daddy's coming home. My 7-year-old daughter still sets a place for him at dinner. She looked directly at Patricia for the first time in months. You taught me to be strong. You taught me to stand up for myself. And then you punished me for doing exactly that. I will never forgive you. And my children will grow up knowing their grandmother murdered their father. Rebecca's voice broke, but she continued. Marcus was kind. He was patient. He tried so hard to make peace with you, and you killed him for it. I hope you think about that every single day for the rest of your life. She walked back to her seat, tears streaming down her face. The judge spoke next. Patricia Walsh, you have been found guilty of the premeditated murder of Marcus Chun. This was not a crime of passion. This was calculated. You planned it, you executed it, and you tried to cover it up. The sentence is life in prison without the possibility of parole. Patricia was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. She looked back once at Rebecca, her face blank, emotionless. Rebecca turned away. 6 months later, Rebecca and her children moved to a smaller house across town. Too many memories on Maple Ridge Court. Bailey came with them. The dog had undergone therapy for trauma, and slowly, carefully, he was learning to trust again. He still flinched around certain people, but with Rebecca and the kids, he was gentle and protective. Nathan, now 13, started seeing a counselor. Sophie threw herself into school. Emma still had nightmares, but they were healing, slowly, the way broken things do when given time and love. Rebecca never visited her mother in prison. Patricia wrote letters, dozens of them, trying to explain, trying to justify. Rebecca returned them all unopened. Some betrayals are too deep to forgive. Detective Coleman closed the case file in June 2024. She had worked hundreds of homicides, but this one stayed with her, because it proved what she had always known. The most dangerous person is not always a stranger. Sometimes it is the one who raised you, the one who claims to love you, the one who cannot accept that love means letting go. Marcus Chun was buried at Willamette National Cemetery. His headstone reads, Beloved Husband and Father. His children visit every month, bring in flowers and stories about their lives. They tell him about school, about friends, about the things he is missing. And Bailey always comes with them, lying quietly beside the grave, keeping watch the way he did that terrible October day. Because in the end, Bailey was the only one who saw the truth from the beginning. And sometimes the most loyal witness is the one who cannot speak but remembers everything. Patricia Walsh will die in prison. Marcus Chun will never see his children grow up. And a family was destroyed because one woman could not accept that her daughter had built a life that did not revolve around her. The warning signs were always there. The control, the resentment, the inability to respect boundaries. People ignored them because Patricia was family, because she was a mother, because surely she would never, but she did. And 3 children lost their father because no one believed a grandmother could be capable of murder. Until it was too late.